something we also found to be extremely useful is a visual representation of the flows. So I mentioned earlier in this Alexa Prize, the developers typically found the need actually for the conversations to have predefined conversations or snippets of conversations with turn taking between the user and the system. That can typically be pretty easily implemented or displayed with a visual call flow. Much as you know traditionally from IVR development. In this case, of course, it needs to be more flexible. IVR is typically very static or very confined. Here we're talking about much freer ways that still need to be visualized. So we try to find ways to visualize this in our platform. And finally, in order to leverage the language capabilities of this English language database, we needed to find ways to allow developers to take a similar approach to machine learning approaches, where you start with sample phrases and train the system that way. So this is what I'm showing here. Is a UI design study. It's a mock-up really of something that we're still currently implementing in our platform. So the workflow, even though there's no actual machine learning at this particular step behind, it's very similar to machine learning, where you start with a sample phrase, like, again, I apologize, it's too small. What red wine goes with duck breast is the sample phrase up there, right? The system will automatically classify this according to certain generic intent categories, such as, is there somebody talking about a problem that they have? Is there somebody that needs information of the type where, what, when, etc.? And a couple other categories. This is a pleasantry that the system already knows about to accelerate the development. And then the user can say, okay, in this phrase that I just mentioned, I think the following words are the most important ones to identify a category. So the customer might click on duck breast, and then we do a search into the language database and find the different meanings of this term duck breast. Duck breast is pretty specific, but other words are much more loose and have much more different types of meanings. So the user can say, they can pick those meanings that really define the word in this context, the meaning of this word in this context, which has a big impact because this also means every one of the different meanings will have different hyponyms and hyperonyms. A bench, for example, can be something that you sit on. It can be something in court, right? It can represent the court. To bench can mean to put some players back on the bench that had just been active on the field. So picking the right meaning is very important in the context of your bot. You can also use hyperonyms. So duck breast, you expand the hyperonyms to see, oh, it's an actual specialization of meat, poultry, bird. So what is it that I'm really after, right? I can say any bird really is what I mean here, rather than just duck breast or any poultry or any duck for that matter. And then you can test your rule finally. And then eventually say, okay, this rule is what I want to have, and import it from my application and use it for my conversational dialogue. So this is a user interface that we conceived of that can be used by non-technical users, even though what is being created internally is a rules-based approach based on a highly trained, highly mature English language model. And another thing that is nice about this language model approach is if you have a language model that is not only for the English language but for the Spanish, German, French, etc. All the things that you do here in English, if this language model is properly represented and linked in between the languages, will also work in other languages. Because take the word bench again. Bench in court is a different meaning than bench, just a wooden bench that you can sit on. In a different language, this word bench might be represented by two different terms. So if you use those proper categorizations here, using such a tool, then what you end up with is a bot that very simply, very easily translates to other languages, which is one of the great benefits of having a language model-based approach over a statistical-based approach where you have to retrain for every new language of your bot.